It's really important to distinguish that when we make a decision, our goal is to make a decision that's a win-win.
Today, I'm super excited to be here with Al and Elissa. They are both the owners, managers, and co-founders at Rather Be Properties, partners in crime and life and business. What were some of the things that you learned that you guys wanted to put in practice in the way you were going to go about delivering hospitality in your business?
I come from a 5-star hospitality background. I worked for resorts for 10 years. It's been a while that I was providing that exceptional service. For me, it's going above and beyond for the guest, anticipating their needs, having each property ready for guests, exceeding guest expectations, and providing that 5-star service.
What did you guys learn in going through that transition from being owner-operators and having your own properties to starting to co-host and manage other people's assets?
There's a lot of complexity with this. There's upon layers upon layers.
A harder challenge because
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality, and really where we bring together leaders, operators, founders, investors, in this space, in this vacation rental space, so they can tell us about their experiences, their journeys, and the lessons that they have learned along the way, as well as maybe some of the mistakes that they have made along the way, so we don't have to make those same mistakes ourselves. Today, I'm super excited to be here with Al and Elissa. They are both the owners, managers, and co-founders at Rather Be Properties, partners in crime and life and business, seems like it. So that's also something that's very exciting. So thank you guys for being here today. Before we get started, where are you taking the call from?
We're in North Carolina.
North Carolina. Amazing. Well, listen, why don't we start by you guys just telling us a little bit about, what your company is all about. What is Rather Be Properties? Where are you guys at?
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks for the introduction, Sebastian, having us on. A little bit about our company. So we started just over 4 years ago, kind of in the middle of COVID. As you know, I've got a background in residential real estate lending, and Elissa's got a background in hospitality, and so we kind of bridged those to fall into the vacation rental industry. Really, we started just investing for other streams of income for ourselves by buying a couple of real estate properties in 2020, looking to rent them out as vacation rentals. And at that time, I was still full-time in residential lending. I was working a lot. Obviously, we know in 2020, like, the whole world shut down with COVID and everything that was happening. So we picked, I think, an interesting time to start our business, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. But at that time, Elissa was running pretty much every aspect of the business. Like I helped with the acquisitions and the finances and the lending aspect, of course, just with my background. But Elissa was really the hospitality queen. And so she took the bull by the horns. And when we first launched our property, she read books. She really dove into understanding how to build an Airbnb listing, how to bring in, integrate with different OTAs through one PMS, and really just operate well, take care of our guests, offer a good product, and have fun with it. So that's kind of where it started 4 years ago. And so for that first year, it was really our 2 properties. We acquired a 3rd property with a couple of partners, and then shortly after we acquired that 3rd property, it was probably at this point, it was midway through 2022, where we had our first co-host reach out to us. We were referred by a real estate agent in the market that we were in. At the time, we started in Coachella Valley in Southern California, kind of that Palm Springs market. Mm-hmm. So we had a real estate agent refer us that first co-hosting client, just kind of out of nowhere. The realtor reached out and said, "Hey, we see you guys are doing well with your listings. Would you be open to maybe managing for another property owner?" So that was the first exposure we had to co-hosting, or property management, so to speak, outside of our own properties. So we brought on our first co-host about 2 years ago, in around this time in 2022. And then a few months after that, I decided I want to retire out of lending. Had a great run for 14 years. Did well, especially during COVID. Like, we were one of the few industries that did well during COVID. A lot of industries took a hit, especially brick and mortar, restaurants, hospitality. But in lending, we did really well. Interest rates went to the lowest record of all time, and we were very, very busy. And so coming out of that, right, we know in 2022, as interest rates started to go up, economy started to soften. I was just burnt out of lending, frankly, and wanted to get out of it. I wanted to get out in 2019, but COVID hit, and then we had a really good run. So I rode that wave. And then I went into our business, into Rather Be Properties, full-time with Elissa basically January. We decided to focus more on building the company. So that was in January. We made the decision. We were traveling quite a bit at that time. And so when we got back to the US in April of 2023 is really where we started to focus on growing the company. And so last year we went from 4 properties in April of 2023. We closed out last year, I think, at 24 properties total. So we had a big growth run for about 7-8 months. And you talked early on about making mistakes and learning through those mistakes. And I feel like we make mistakes every single day. And that's a lot of how we learn, right? So since then, we're sitting in November of 2024, and we're sitting right somewhere around 38 to 40 properties, 6 of which we either own outright, or not outright, but own within our family, or have interest in with other partners. And then the rest of them we co-host for other vacation rental owners, and goal is to grow the grow the portfolio and offer great service. And our company mission statement's pretty simple. We want to deliver 5-star guest experience while maximizing owner profits. And so it's a simple statement, but
simple to say, but hard to execute, right?
Very,
yep. That's awesome. That's exciting. And I just want to, go back to kind of that mix that you guys have of skill sets and backgrounds, and kind of the edge that you guys think that might bring to the table in terms of the business, aspect. So you mentioned like real estate and whatnot, lending, and then hospitality as well. So on the hospitality side, you were saying that Elissa started reading all these books and getting trained into like how to run and apply, I guess, the hospitality aspect to the vacation rental operation. Like, what were some of the things, Elissa, perhaps that you learned through that process, as far as like things that you guys wanted to intentionally put in practice in the way you were going to go about delivering hospitality in your business?
Yeah, so I come from a 5-star hospitality background. I worked for resorts for 10 years, so it's been a while that I was providing that exceptional service. For me, it's going above and beyond for the guest, anticipating their needs, having firewood, having fast Wi-Fi, having a pack and play if they're traveling with a baby, kind of just having each property ready for guests. And we started setting up our properties for young families because we are a young family. We had little kids, so traveling for us in hotels was always more hard, and we just wanted to provide a good family environment for a lot of our guests. So for me, it's, exceeding guest expectations and providing that 5-star service. So,
like when you compare the aspects of delivering great hospitality and exceeding guest expectations in a hotel background, like in a hotel world and environment, versus in vacation rentals, like what were some of the sort of differences that you guys saw, or you specifically, given that background, when you started doing it in the vacation rental space, or maybe some of the challenges that perhaps you identified as being unique to trying to stand by that standard of guest quality and experience in the vacation rental world versus the hotel world?
So I think our cleaners, we hold them to a high expectation. We have lots of checklists that Al's still working on. For me, it's communication. So I oversee our guest comms team. I make sure that everyone's communicating correctly and not being short, but being nice to guests, kind of over the top nice, so guests have a great experience, because majority of our business is the communication and making sure that the guests are well taken care of through a message or phone.
Yeah, if I can piggyback too, I think one of the like really big differences between like Elissa was working for some of the top resorts internationally. And so they're really big companies and they have a lot of resources and they have a lot of staff, and delivering a guest experience when you have all of the operational components in-house, I think is a little, I don't want to say it's easier. It's more simple to execute because you control quality, right? Whereas on the vacation rental side, these are all little independent hotels. They're all little independent boutique hotels that we're operating. They're single unit properties, but at the end of the day, they're run like hotels. We have to turn them. We have to do same day turns very often. We have to make sure that we have the ability to stock linens on site in case of, stains or damages between turns. Like a lot of that stuff comes up. So there's a lot of logistics that we had to work out. And we're still literally, right before we just jumped on here, I'm re-looking at all of the locking mechanisms for all the properties, because some properties have combo locks, some have keys, and the keys are in lock boxes. And the challenge with some of these logistics is if a key is lost or a vendor takes it, then our cleaning crew can't get in to do their job on time. And then they're rushed to get the turn done. And so they're delivering not the best property to the guest. So we're reanalyzing kind of the logistics with setting our team up to be able to win too. Whereas in the hotel game, it's not necessarily like that. If you have a 50-unit hotel, you have your own local cleaning staff on site. You're staffing them and they're turning the units, and you have laundry machines on site. It's very different than in the hospitality, in the vacation rental space. We're finally getting to the point, I think, where we're getting economies of scale. Like we've been talking about the last month or so, maybe centralizing a unit or a location in one of our primary markets where we have 20 units right now, 20 different properties that we're managing, where we can stock our own inventory. We can do our own linen service, things like that. That's really hard to do until you have scale, right? Like unless you have 15, 20, 30 units in a market, it doesn't make sense to hire a full-time cleaner. It's easier to outsource. So I think quality is a challenge, delivering consistent quality in comparison to the hotel.
Yeah, no, for sure. Especially as you scale as well. And to your point, precisely if you're doing so in a structure where there's, most vacation rental properties are single family properties that are spread in different, locations, to your point, and that makes it very challenging. Now, what about the transition from you guys going from being owner operators and having your own properties to starting to co-host and manage other people's assets? What did you guys learn in going through that transition?
I feel like we learn every day. You want to take on?
No, I'll start. You can finish it. So for us, it's easy to make decisions. If a guest checks in, something isn't right, we can refund them, or we can do what we need on the spot. Managing someone else's property, some of the problem. We report to them a lot. They have questions a lot, so it's a harder challenge because we're not making the end decision for everything. But that's all hands getting there.
Yeah, look, to Elissa's point, if a guest says, "Hey, do you have a high chair available for the upcoming stay?" Well, we can both look at it and go, "Well, we don't, but we'd love to add that amenity." And it's really simple to do. We can buy one for $60, place it in the property, add an amenity to the property, call it a day. We own that property. We own the money. We own the debt. We own the expenses. All that's on us. We make the decision. With owners, there's a wide range of different types of owners. There's owners that are real estate investors at heart, and they have multiple properties. It's not their first time in vacation rentals. They may have had self-manage their properties for a year or two and then pass it over to us, or they have multiple properties with other vacation rental management companies. So they have experience versus an owner who's brand new to this entire industry. The expectations, the communication, everything is completely different. And frankly, it has to be. Like when I go through owner financials each month, right? So I'm heavily involved in the finances of the business. So review the bookkeeping each month after our bookkeeping firm, finalizes the numbers. I issue the owner reports. I address their questions. I field their questions. We put notes for them on expenses. It's like we have an issue that comes up for the guest side. So we'll talk about our mission statement, 5-star hospitality while maximizing owner profits. It's such a challenge. It's a double-ended sword because 5-star hospitality says, if a guest is complaining about a major amenity, we need to get that amenity addressed right away. So for example, if a water heater's out and the guest can't get hot water during their stay, that's an immediate attention that needs to be addressed. Well, we get a vendor out there. That's the first issue. We've done that. And the vendor comes back and goes, I can't fix the problem, but I can replace the water heater for you. It's going to cost you $700 to do. So then we have to then analyze that at cost benefit analysis and go, okay, should I refund the guests and have them vacate? And then we address this and get 3 more bids from other vendors, maybe saving a couple $100. Or do we rip the Band-Aid off, get the issue addressed there, knowing that we don't have to refund the guest. So we have money from the revenue if we did that repair right there. So it's making those decisions in real time as they come up, and they come up 24/7, 365 days a year. And then it's also then being able to explain and justify that to the owner, like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I made the decision to spend $700 of your money at, Friday at 7 p.m. and here's why. So there's so much that comes into this. Some owners want certain inventory stocked at their property, and they have a very specific look for their property, which isn't a bad thing. They love that. It's a pride of ownership. They invested in a vacation rental. They want to deliver very similar experience that we want to deliver to guests, but it's taking their expectations and what they want, being able to manage that and make sure that our team can execute it, not just one time, but every time. There's a lot of complexity with this. Like there's layers upon layers upon layers. So that's a high level.
And you touch on an important point, which is precisely that point where you guys are kind of in the middle. Like as property managers, you have to kind of have that balance between what the owner needs are and wants are and preferences are and the guests, right? And that decision is not easy at all. But I wonder how you guys go about it, because I've had people here that are very clearly, gonna incline themselves towards one side or the other when they have to, when they're faced with a situation where they have to make a decision. I've had people tell me, I'll take the side of the guest, because I know that even though the owner's not going to be happy in the long run, the guests being happy will lead to better, reviews that will lead to better performance. Yeah. And so the owner will eventually be happy. And then I've had people tell me, no, but the guest comes and goes. And like, I cannot be trying to please every single guest, because there's unreasonable guests out there that just like, there's nothing that's going to make them happy. So I rather partner, and tilt on the side of my owner, which is the actual partner that I'll be with for the long run. Like there's some truth to each side, right? But like, I wonder how you guys go about deciding which side to go with. Is there any frameworks? Is there any like rules of thumb you guys use, or how do you guys approach that when you have to make a decision on one side or the other?
It's a challenge that I think we go through, I feel like every day. Like there's always a snap that comes up and we have to decide kind of whose side are we taking on this almost. But it's really important to distinguish that when we make a decision, our goal is to make a decision that's a win-win. Guest win to the best of our ability. The guest wins and the owner wins. I'm a firm believer that there's win-win in almost every single circumstance that comes up. Like we had an incident or a situation the other day at a property. Guests checked in, and it was in the city of San Diego, in California. Guests checked into the property. They had a stroller with them. They left all their stuff at the property. They accidentally left their stroller outside the house. Middle of the day, it was like 1:00 in the afternoon. They messaged us and they said, "Hey, in the city." Yeah. They said, "Hey, I'm sorry. We left our stroller outside. We're out." They were out, touristing for the day. Is it possible do you guys have the ability to maybe put the stroller inside for us? And so our team looked at that, and, our team member, Kia, had reached out to 3 different vendors, including, and this is a multi-unit property, so there's a tenant in the back unit. We reached out to that tenant last, I should say. We reached out to our handyman, our cleaner, a second handyman, and nobody was available to be able to bring the stroller in. Now, at the end of the day, is it a requirement for us to do that? No, the guest made the mistake of leaving their stroller outside. Like that had nothing to do with us. We could have very easily at the beginning said, "I'm sorry, we don't have anybody local right now to be able to." But we tried, right? We tried four different people. We contacted it in an hour, no luck. The last option, and it was on a weekend, the last option is to source a third-party brand new vendor like a handyman, and they would charge $100 to go to that house and move the item inside, right? So cost benefit analysis. So the question that we were going through in this is, should we do it? Number one. And two, should we pass the costs on? Should we eat the cost? Like all these scenarios. So Alyssa's response was effectively to the guests, like, we did our best. Here's everything that we did. So like an action report. Here's all the things that we attempted. Here's the last thing we can do, but it's going to cost, and we're happy to do it, but we have to pass this cost over to you. And the guest ultimately said, no, I'm okay. All good. Now, the guest is still checked in, so we'll see if they leave us a great review or not for that. But I feel like we went above and beyond for that guest. So I think, so there's elements to this, right? I'm big on framing and how we frame a situation. It's less about what happens and more about how we frame what happens to that individual that impacts their experience. They say perception isn't reality. Well, I have a sales background. In sales, we've always said perception is reality, because how a guest feels is their reality. So if a guest is happy about their check-in process and it was seamless, well, then that's their experience. And if their experience is great, awesome. Conversely, if the owner has a bad experience, then that's totally justified. That's their experience. That's how they feel. So we've got to balance them. How we deliver the news ultimately is what impacts it. So if we have to make a decision to spend the owner's money when we don't want to, but we feel like we need to, I like to go through it. You asked a framework. I go through a cost benefit analysis really simply. So if we have to repair something that's a major hindrance on the guest, let's talk about Airbnb for a second. We pretty much know, and for those of you listening that don't know, a general kind of rule is if a big amenity is offline during a guest stay, Airbnb is probably going to defer to a 30% refund off of their booking. Or more, right? Like 30% is probably the average that we've seen. Sometimes it's 10, but usually it's 30%. Now, if it's a $2,000 booking for a week and that 30% comes out to $600, okay? And they check into the property and they go, there's this major amenity that's having an issue. A refrigerator went out, okay? Which happens from time to time. Owners go, I have home warranty. We're in the US. We have home warranty policies. When a buyer buys a property, they get what's called a home warranty. It's a warranty policy for 12 months. So you can leverage the warranty policy to pay for like an appliance repair or something like that, where it's a lot cheaper if you leverage the warranty than if you do it on your own. The problem is that the home warranty companies take weeks to resolve the issue. So we have a refrigerator that's broken. It'll take 3 weeks for that to get resolved through a home warranty, which, as we know, is an absolute no-fly zone with vacation rentals. Like you can't have a non-operating refrigerator for 3 weeks. So the question becomes, do we spend, we get a vendor out there, a vendor goes, it's going to cost you $650 to repair this item here. And I'll do it for you today. And the guest is totally happy with that if we can get it done. No issues, no refund needed if we take care of it. If we don't, at a minimum, we're probably gonna have to refund 30%, which is $600. Do we spend $650 in this case to save the 5-star review and knowing that we're gonna probably get that money back immediately in revenue to avoid a refund? Like it makes sense to do it, right? So we got a cost benefit analysis, and it's almost like you got to get really good at doing that a lot. And then train that. We're in the process, like I'm trying to teach my maintenance lead to do the same thing. Cost benefit analysis. Here's the issue. Here's the cost. What's the opportunity cost? So if we don't do this, how much money could we lose or potentially not gain? And then just weigh the options out. That's a logical approach, right? Like this is the thing I love about numbers and data. There's no emotion behind it. You can't lie. Like 1 + 1 will always equal 2. Elon Musk takes us to Mars, it'll be a different calculation. But you know what I mean? As we live today, 1 + 1 = 2. That's not going to change. I could be happy or I can be sad or angry or frustrated or excited. 1 + 1 still equals 2. So if I articulate that to the owner and say, listen, here's the numbers. Here's why I made this decision. 9 out of 10 times they go, that makes sense. I would have probably done the same thing and we're good. But if I don't spend the time to explain to the owner why we did that and frame it properly, they're gonna be thinking in their mind, well, what else are they wasting money on? What else are they not doing for me? All these thoughts start to creep up. And the second that doubt comes in, that doubt starts to spiral. So
no, that's a great one. And I think that there's two things there. One is, of course, as you're saying, being able to frame it and articulate it and explain the thought process. And then the other one is like having a thought process, because I feel like people can just go into like making decisions because decisions have to be made and someone has to, go ahead and take the lead on making them, but without necessarily having a clear reasoning why. Just, it seems like the best option. It seems like the most logical option. But then when you're confronted by the owner asking questions, if you don't have that clear sort of thought process that you went through, then to your point, the owner is going to be like, well, I would not have chose that option, right? But if you have a thought process, then it's like all of a sudden it makes sense. So I really like that that framework. And then the opportunity cost component of it is also huge. Like in the example that you were talking about, like, yes, not only is the review that you risk having that's going to affect you, then look at the effect that might have over the long run, in your listing and your overall performance. But then also, like, what about if you have to block some dates because now all of a sudden it's going to take 3 weeks for the fridge to get solved, the fridge situation to get solved, and now what's the revenue you're going to be losing out on? So there's so much that goes into that opportunity cost component, which I guess is the part that perhaps some owners struggle to see, when they go in and decide to block some dates to go and stay at the property in the middle of the peak season, when they could have made, all the money for the entire year. Or, you guys seem to be relating there.
Well, we get it. We understand. You remember, we started as owning our own vacation rentals, right? And I think that's a unique perspective that we bring to our owners as well, is we're not just property managers that, I won't name any names, but there are very large property managers in the US, vacation management companies that they didn't really build their companies from the ground up. They built it by acquiring a bunch of other companies, smaller companies. And I feel like when you don't go through the tough work, like if we didn't own our own properties and have to make that decision ourselves, let me put this for context. We bought our first vacation rental 4 years and call it 2 or 3 months ago. And so we just went through the process of refurnishing the whole house. We got 4 years of use out of the $25,000 of furnishings that we put in. It's time for a refresh, right? So we refreshed the whole property. We just spent another 25, 30 grand to refurnish, do the inside, outside, more amenities, better landscaping, paint, all that stuff. And it's a refresh for the house. What's interesting is Elissa and I looked at this the other day. We're flying to California for Thanksgiving to see my family, and we're going to stay at the property for 2 nights. I think I can count on one hand how many times we vacationed at our own properties. I think this will be one of the first times that we have, because it's really hard. My mind is always, I'm numbers oriented. So I'm always going, well, opportunity cost. If we stay there, it's not that we're staying there for free. We're losing money and revenue that we could potentially bring in. So we have an owner's mindset. Like, we get it. We battle this ourselves too. So sometimes we have to tell the owners in a really nice way, like, hey, I have to remind them, like, I know you weren't happy about the revenue this particular month, but remember, you stayed for a week. So we only had, 75% of the potential revenue that we could have even gotten. It's a touchy subject to have, because we certainly don't want to tell owners, like, we don't want you staying at your properties. We do. We love when our owners stay at their properties. That's why we invested in vacation rentals to begin with. But it does play a role, and it's how we frame it, how we have that conversation, I think, that impacts.
Yeah, makes sense. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, we have stayed at our own properties. We just do it before we launch them. Once those photos are taken, once it's on platform, it becomes
a business.
But before that, it's work and stock and inventory and clean and maintenance.
Yeah. So to piggyback, we've stayed, but it's usually been because we need to do work at the properties.
Okay. So not necessarily to relax or take a vacation, but to set it up and launch it. Yeah. That's interesting. And guys, tell me more about that process of buying your own properties at first, and kind of starting to build that portfolio of yours. Was it one at a time? Did you guys kind of go through the process of kind of buying one and renovating and refinancing? Was there that, at all? Or what was the process?
Yeah. So the method you're talking about is the burr method. We're going to be burring a property pretty soon. Our first one in North Carolina that we bought to flip initially, because we flipped probably 40 or 50 properties in the last 5-6 years as well. So we have, like, I've got a lending background with numbers. Obviously property flipping itself, we've done a lot of work within property flipping. So we've done small rehabs of 30-40 grand. We've done rehabs that are $200,000-300,000. We've got a $350,000 project in California we're working on right now. Our really simply at the beginning, it was to bring passive income and other income streams. So our situation, I think, is a little bit different than maybe people that are watching this podcast. We had disposable cash flow. I was making quite a bit of money in my last career for quite some time. And so we were looking at it from the standpoint of we want tax savings as well, to quantify. And the only reason I bring this up is, we're talking about the numbers. And I think it's important to take context. How we acquired properties, we were able to take more risk. And the reason for this is, having, like, I had W-2 income. So in the US, if you're W-2'd, you're on payroll, your taxes are coming directly out of your payroll. You are in the highest taxed income bracket by far nationwide in the US. And so I was in a position where I was making 7 figures a year in W-2 income. So my tax liability being in the US and in the state of California, which is one of the highest tax states in the US, we were paying 55% in tax in total, like a large sum. And so we have, our tax code in the US allows for something called a cost segregation study to front load and claim bonus depreciation on a real estate property. When you have bonus depreciation, if you're a qualified real estate professional in the IRS's eyes, please consult your CPA before you do any of this. So I'm crystal clear, I'm not a CPA. Not a financial advisor. I don't know, and I'm not an attorney on a tax code, but I've done enough research onto this to know how it will impact our decision-making with real estate investment. So I just want to share that. Cost segs allow you to front load your depreciation. So if you get, if you buy a piece of real estate, everybody knows you get depreciation on that property on an annual basis. There are components of the property that depreciate at different rates, 5 years, 15 years, 27 and a half years. A cost segregation study will take all that depreciation. It's like a $3,000 report. You hire a third-party engineering firm that does it, and they'll write you a report that says, instead of claiming your depreciation over 5, 15, or 27 years, you could front load everything in the first year. So that's how we structured it when we bought the houses. I set myself up as a real estate professional, qualified real estate professional, to be able to claim those deductions, which was an offset to my W-2 income tax. So we could have, here's my point with this. We could have bought a really bad property at a really bad time. And just because of the tax savings, it was a good buy in comparison to the market. So I'm a firm believer, because of my background in residential lending. I was in the top 1/10 of 1% of originators nationwide for 7 years. So I did a lot of loans, and I got to see, the blessing of that is I got to see people's loan applications, bank statements, credit reports, spending habits, income levels, investments, everything. And you learn this stuff. And at the end of the day, with the investments that are allotted to us to invest money into real estate, there's tax benefits to it. And so we have to look at all this stuff. I'm a believer that you can't time the market. So I had no idea. Like, when we bought our first property in 2020, I was in lending for 15 years. I still had no idea that interest rates were going to be the lowest we've ever seen. And during COVID and the 2 years after would be the biggest real estate boom in the history of the US real estate market. There's no way we would have known that. You know what I mean? Like, it happened. So we invested based off of the position that we were in our lives, and it made sense financially to invest, and we wanted to. So it certainly wasn't a timed market. Now, obviously, we ran revenue projections and we ran breakdowns of what our expenses were going to be. And we had to look at these numbers and decide, like, does it make sense? We're going to invest X amount of money into the property. That will probably return X amount of profit to us on an annual basis. So what's our annual cash on cash return? That's one way to look at it. Internal rate of return is another term that's used in real estate investment. The difference between the two, cash on cash is like, if you put, $100,000 into an investment, how much money will you get back each year? And if it's, say, 10,000 on 100 grand, that's a 10% cash on cash return. IRR, your internal rate of return, also factors in other things like potentially tax savings, and then your appreciation on that property. So IRR is like if we sold the house in 3 years and we made 10% a year, plus we made 30% when we sold the house on appreciation. Well, my cash on cash would be 10%, but my IRR would be about 20% in that example. So I think understanding the difference between the two, being able to run numbers is important to make sure you're investing into the right property. For us, the tax savings was just like icing on the cake. It was kind of one of those where like we could totally screw this up for the next 5 years and we'd still be in the green just because of the tax savings.
Because of the tax savings. And on that note about the differences between those two metrics to look for when investing in real estate, there are some people that will really invest based on cash on cash only. And then there's some people that are really betting on that appreciation, and in some cases, even that forced appreciation that they expect that they'll be able to get out of their investment, more so in the multifamily space, that forced appreciation component, but starting to happen as well a little bit in the vacation rental space. What is your guys' kind of philosophy when it comes to that? Like, are you just in it for the cash flow, so to speak? And if there's no cash flow, there's no deal that you guys will pull the trigger on, or what's your thesis there?
So my investment strategy is different. I think ours is different than most. I will add to this too. We're in a different position in life. Okay. So we're in our early 30s. We're both 33, about to turn 34, both of us in like 2 months. We have 2 small children. We have a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old. And sorry, 7. She just turned 7 yesterday. Wow. It's growing up so quickly.
So the look, huh?
So we, in terms of our investment, criteria or thesis, or what what our kind of our North Star is for investment. Again, I think it's relative to where each person is in their phase of life. I came from, I'll add to this. I grew up broke. My parents didn't have much money at all. It wasn't until I started making money in lending where we had, a surplus of money and cash flow. So it makes a very big difference if what we're investing in has to pay our bills or not. So I'll add that. The other aspect, so for example, if we need cash flow on a monthly basis to pay our bills, otherwise we're going to go bankrupt, then I think it's super healthy to invest on a cash on cash return basis. Like you have to. If you don't have the cash flow coming in, you're screwed. Excuse my French. You're in a tough spot, right? Whereas we were in a very different position when we started. And even now, look, I told you I've retired out of lending and focused full-time into this business. And 90% of the profits we've earned in the last almost 2 years have been reinvested into growth for our company, right? And economically, we're sitting at the end of 2024. Like I don't think there's any question that economically, worldwide, we're in a worse off economic position than we were in 2020, 2021, and first half of 2022. So we have seen ADR and occupancy across the board drop year over year, right? And that impacts our own real estate properties. So I think where you're at in your life also impacts this. So I'll give you an example. One of those properties that we own, I have 2 partners on that particular property. And one of my partners is retired and he's invested through his retirement account. And his wife is getting ready to retire in 5 months from now. Now that property is struggling on a cash flow basis right now because we ended up buying it at the peak of the market. So for everybody listening to this, like we don't know everything. We make mistakes just like everybody else does. And so what we're trying to do is navigate through the mistakes and the timing and all this and make the best of sometimes a sour situation. So this particular property is underperforming right now. And so I have a capital call on it. I need my partners and I to bring in capital to cover the expenses that are needed until we get through the rough patch. Well, my ability to invest money into that is very different than my partners. One of my partners, again, we're 33, 34 years old. If we screw up for the next 10 years, we're still in a healthy spot because we got ahead of our investments and savings way early on. Whereas my partner is retired and his wife's about to retire in 5 months from now. They're in the mode of capital preservation. They can't afford nearly the amount of risk that we can because we have time. The law of compounding interest, Warren Buffett says compounding interest is the 8th wonder of the world or the 9th wonder of the world. And it's because it's complete magic what compounding interest can do over time. So if you run an 8% return over 10 years on a $100,000 principal versus an 8% return on $100,000 over 30 years, the amount of investment you have at the end of that 10 or 30 years is significant. It's not a third different. It's wildly different because of compounding interest. So in his case, he has to make a smarter decision on his investments because he's in a retirement mode of capital preservation where we have more room to take risk. So I say this because everybody listening to this call, everybody's going to be in completely different phases of their lives. And so back to where this question started, do we look at cash on cash or appreciation long term? Here's one thing I know, and this is a fact. 2008, which was arguably the worst economic crash that the US has experienced since the Great Depression. Real estate by far. I mean, the amount of foreclosures, property value drops, everything was off the charts. And still 6, 7, 8 years later, definitely less than a decade later, values were still back above the peak and now are way higher than where they were in 2008. So logically, I look at that and I go, okay, so it's a timing game. Even if you buy a property at a bad time. Now, I understand that there's a lot of gray area in this and there's opportunity costs. So if I'm burying a bunch of money into a bad performing property versus just cutting the arm off to save the body, so to speak, and taking the money and investing it somewhere else, that's obviously there's an element to it. But my point on a simple form is it's not the end of the world if you have a bad investment or an investment that may not be performing. Bad investment's different, but an investment that's not performing as well as you want it to. And if you're trying to time the market, for example, you can't time the market. You can't. Nobody can time when even the greatest investors in the world. Paul Tudor Jones is the greatest stock trader in history. He's got one of the best track records on the planet. And he's right, I think 50 or 60% of the time, I think. It's crazy that we think that we can time and predict how the market's going to do. So invest based off where you're at in your life. What's your risk threshold? So if this property, when you're running your investment returns and analytics to find out if you're going to pull the trigger on a property, we always, by nature, and not everybody, but probably 80% of the population is going to run their numbers aggressively, meaning they're going to look at the best picture when they go to pull the trigger on that property. Run an analysis on a worst case scenario. So like if the property performs 20% lower than you expect it to, what does your investment look like? And if you're okay with that and you can handle that, then invest. If you can't, like if your property drops 20% in revenue and all of a sudden you're underwater and then you can't put food on the table for your family, that's an extremely high risk to take, right? Or your family's livelihood at risk. Whereas if that property underperforms and you don't bring any money for 12 months and you're still okay because you have savings and investments, well, then you can take that risk. So risk and like analyzing what property makes the most sense, appreciation versus cash flow or a mix of both, I think it's relative to everybody's situation. For us, we're playing the long game. So we're in the process of acquiring real estate, making sure that they cash flow or at least break even and hold these properties long term. Again, we got a big tax savings up front too. So even if our property breaks even for 5 years, we still made more than what a regular investor would make on that property if they cash flowed because of the tax savings that we got and relative to our income level at that time. A lot of gray area, but I hope that helps.
That's super interesting. And we could elaborate a lot further on this whole real estate piece because again, I always start by saying it's trying to combine hospitality and real estate, which are two sides of the same coin. I'm curious, just again, not financial advice or whatnot, but can you go retroactively? Like now that you're no longer W-2, in terms of those, forced or accelerated depreciations that you were talking about, like, can you go retroactively into your income of previous years and like write it off?
Retroactively. So, no, you can carry forward the loss. So, as I understand it, if you have not done a cost segregation study on a property that you bought several years ago, I have heard from multiple investors that you can go back and you can claim and do a cost segregation study and claim the bonus depreciation for a prior acquired property.
Okay.
But it can't be any sooner than when you acquired the property. So if I acquire the property in 2020, I can go back and I can claim that bonus depreciation and amend my tax returns from the time I acquired the property. That's my understanding. So I'm clear, verify that with the CPA. But you can't go back prior and claim anything on that because prior to 2020, because that's when you bought the property. So, and then conversely though, if I have a loss and my loss, say in 2023, my tax loss outweighs my income. So my loss is a negative. My actual taxable income on my tax returns is a negative. That will carry forward to the following year. So you can harvest losses for upcoming years of future income. That's
Okay.
tax
Makes
strategies
sense.
all people use too.
Makes sense. Let's go back a little bit on the hospitality piece, and then we might go back to real estate for the end. But on the hospitality side, how do you guys split kind of the roles currently on a day-to-day basis? Like just to understand the structure, who does what, and where do each of you spend most of your time? And I'm curious to know as well, like how has that evolved, right, since you guys got started? As far as like you as founders and leaders, like the evolution of where you decide to each of you spend your time.
We'll start with that one.
Yeah. So I like the pretty stuff. I like to make the listing look good. Everything up front. So launching the listing, making sure we have amenities, making sure the photos look good. Description is really good, making sure our guest comms team and me sometimes are replying to guests the way that I want them to reply to, holding that standard for the communication. I did start in cleaning. Now I was kind of taking that over.
Yeah, we're bouncing between, I'll add this as context too. The skill sets that we needed from 0 to say 20 properties is different than the skill sets that we currently need to get from, we're at about 38, 40 properties. So to get from like 40 properties to like 60, 80 or 100, it's significantly different challenges that we're dealing with than 0 to 40. So we're also pivoting what our focuses are based off what the business needs. So what Elissa was mentioning a minute ago with getting a lot more involved in guest comms, setting the standard for how our team's communicating with guests, she's getting a lot more involved in that just in the recent few weeks because we see that we need it right now because our systems need an upgrade. Our operational processes need an upgrade because the complexity of the business goes up a lot when you increase the number of properties you have. And so Elissa's really focused on making sure the team's doing the day-to-days and taking care of the guests. And I'm on the other side of it, making sure that we're taking care of the property and the owner, and then focus on growth, sales, the money, the numbers, the finances that come with it. So, if you ask us the same question in 3 months from now, like it's going to look different because it's what the business needs. And right now, business needs Elissa focused on the hospitality experience for guests and how we communicate, train the team on that, set the policies for what we do. If there's a power outage, what do we do if we need to move a guest from one property to another? And then conversely, I'm working on the revenue management side, for example. I'm working on reiterating our whole process for how we do revenue management on a 40 property portfolio because it's wildly different to manage pricing for 40 properties than 20. The time invested is not double. It's more than double.
Yeah, no, I'm always interested in this evolution, right? And there seems to be those phases, to your point, of growth that you go through, and it seems like at each of these stages of growth, something breaks, right? Something breaks that needs fixing, and it's never it's never clear what that next thing that will break necessarily will be. So that's the challenge of scaling, right? Like trying to anticipate certain things, but at the same time, you cannot anticipate so much that you end up over investing into an infrastructure that is too large for what you can afford at the moment. So it's kind of that overspending, underspending dilemma when it comes to talent and tech and infrastructure, which is interesting. And what have you learned through that transition, like as far as the growth stages that you'd say you've had until now?
Yeah, I mean, so one example is revenue management, right? So we outsourced revenue management to a larger firm. April of this year, I think March we engaged, and then April we launched with them. And after 3 months, 4 months actually, I decided to pull revenue management back. A couple components we've talked about a little bit, I think, on our last call, but fundamental reasons. The revenue manager was not compensated off of performance; they were compensated off of just monthly per listing. This is how much they charge. And so when we're unhappy with the performance of the listings, it was a challenge to get them to fix some of that. Now they did their very best, right? And I'll be clear, they do a great job, but I think fundamentally how we run our business and our properties, my core value, my values and my belief in revenue management, it's just some of it's different than theirs. It's not good or bad. It's just different. And so we had to do what we had to do for our business that made the most sense. And so I pulled revenue management back in-house and I took that back over. The next phase for us with revenue management is to bring on somebody on staff that's staffed by us that can report up to me, hit KPI metrics, et cetera. So we make mistakes just like everybody else does. I spent, I don't know, probably 15 grand over that 4 months in revenue management costs, and to realize that it wasn't something that made sense right now. So to your point, that conversely, it's like we weren't doing things where we were too big for that, that we were too small for what we were doing. We did it where we were too big. Like a third-party revenue manager, I think makes sense if you're a single person, if you're a single operator and you've got 5 properties, it's easier to maintain and stay on top of the revenue manager to do their job. But on the other side of it, it's hard if you have 40 properties. So, that's one. I've iterated our process of launching a property, like probably 50 different times. And so what we track on a property in terms of access codes, amenities, everything, walkthrough videos. So my team can see what this property is when they're managing it and guests bring questions in. Well, we've changed what we document on our property probably 10 times. And within that, I tried to iterate it 50 times. I go out and we launch a property. I'll spend a week launching a property myself just to learn all the ins and outs of, maybe we should do combo locks, padlocks instead of key padlocks. The price is the same, but the logistical headache of losing a key, way easier if there's just a combo code on it. Like little stuff like that makes a big difference. So we play, we're in the long game. So we're not afraid to invest time and money into the business. Whereas, I've got friends that have more properties, have less, have about the same, and this is their full-time income. And that's awesome. I want to be in a place where we're printing, the enough money that we need to cover our expenses every single month, and we're saving and investing versus just reinvesting back into the company. But to me, figuring out what those bottlenecks are or constraints is another way to put them, and removing those constraints. So I learned this from Alex Hermosi. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Cool.
I thought of him as soon as you said constraints.
So I went to his scaling workshop back in May. His first
in Vegas.
In Vegas, yeah, at their corporate office.
Oh man,
their second level, which is two weekends a year, and that was 2 months ago. I went, and that was revolutionary. So that's where, and that's a very expensive event. I don't even know what the ticket cost is now. It's probably 25 grand for the year to do that. But you literally go sit down with their team that coaches their portfolio companies that they have interest in, that they have ownership interest in. And their head of HR, for example, the head of recruiting will teach all the portfolio companies what their recruiting processes are. Their head of customer success, same thing. So we get to sit in a room for these people 2 days, 2 times per year, and they'll study our business and they'll show us and they'll help us work through our constraints. So I learned this mindset shift with Alex and Layla, listening to the content a lot and then being at their workshops, which is all we're trying to do is upgrade to the company to the next level. As soon as we elevate to the next level, it's like you're playing a video game, right? You go from level 1 to level 2, things get a little bit harder and you got to play with it. And you got to iterate and go, okay, I've learned how to get through level 2. Now we go to level 3, and so on and so on. We're just unlocking those levels in our business. And our goal is to remove those constraints as we go through. So like, we run our business in 90-day cycles. This is what we focus on for the next 90 days. Let's work through those constraints, and then let's upgrade the business. And then once we get there, we're going to be presented with new challenges. Then we have to go and tackle those constraints. So it's a big thing for me because I'm an emotional creature. I've been in sales for a long time, to take the emotion out of it and focus more on logic. Emotionally, it's frustrating when I have to deal with problems. But logically, uncovering problems and challenges, I don't like calling it problems, but challenges, we unlock those. That's like the universe saying, hey, if you remove this block out of the front of your vehicle is going to go that much further. Mm-hmm. So we got to identify those constraints, remove them, and then we get upgraded, and then we do that again. So it's just a process of iterating and removing constraints to grow the company over a long period of time.
I love that. I'm such a fan of everything that Alex Hormozi puts out there, and crazy. I'd love to get more into like what you guys learned in that workshop. I have to say this, I usually don't sell in this episode, but can't help myself. You talked about revenue management. I do think it depends on who you're working with as far as when it makes sense to bring that function in-house, because I do know of operations that are large and still decide to outsource for strategic reasons, right? Precisely, asking themselves, what's the best use of their time. And, Alex talks about leverage too. And, what is the thing that's going to get you the most output per unit of time? And in some cases, if you have, a very numbers background and are very analytical and, have sort of the personality and skill sets that could make you a great revenue manager, then yes, that might be a function that's very appropriate for you to have in-house. And in other cases, people, want to focus on scaling the business and want to focus on, running the operation and, the relationships with the owners, where, the answer to that question, is this the best use of my time, might be, well, not so much the opportunity cost of you becoming a revenue management world-class expert is higher, right? So I think, just like everything else we've discussed, it's all contextual to, where, everyone is in and the skill sets that, are already part of the team in-house. But certainly an interesting topic. What else, what was the main takeaway other than that from that workshop? Other than this theory of constraints, like what were you able to put in practice from having been in that workshop, as soon as you guys came back?
Yeah. Okay. There was a lot. One immediate thing that we implemented that I was able to do when we got back, and it worked really well, is I took Alex's, I don't know if he's the head of HR or recruiting, or a mix of both. His name is Frank. And Frank's piece on recruiting and hiring new talent, and his process for job ads. So he flipped the concept of hiring and recruiting new staff from what used to be a pain point for me of like, I hate to do this. It's not fun. It's, the process of interviewing team members, putting job ads out, all that stuff is not fun, but it has to be done. He flipped that from like, it has to be done to, this is a sales process. Mm-hmm. And for me, it really drove the point home, and I resonated with it because I have such a long background in sales. Like sales, that's like my happy place, right? That's the place. Some people will call it. Some people, and this is true, like really good salespeople are usually dysfunctional as human beings, because we're emotional creatures. But that inherently helps with sales and converting clients and converting prospects rather into clients. And so the process of recruiting staff for me was like operational mentality before, whereas after going to the workshop, Frank flipped it to a sales process. So it totally resonated with me, where the concept is, it's like every other aspect of sales is a funnel. You got to bring as many people through that top level of the funnel and filter them all down till you have some qualified candidates, and then you go ahead and select the ones that make the most sense. So I did this as soon as we got back. I put a job ad out that was more sales oriented. We staff virtual assistants as well as local staff in the US. And so I did this specifically with our virtual assistants, just because that was a need that we had at that time. So I recruited 4 new team members within about 45 days after I got back. The interesting thing is I got really good talent. How did we do it? I followed Frank's process. So I put a really good job ad out, and the job ad is a sales pitch. To be clear, a job ad is not a bullet point that this is what you're going to do every day. A job ad is, this is why you should join our company. Let's sell you into why you want to join our company. So we get as many people. I think I had, within 3 days, I had 120 applications of people that were interested in applying for the position. At the very end of it, so I'm going to give you some tactics. Job ads, sales oriented. If you go to acquisition.com, their website, Frank's literally says, go look at their job ads that he posts on their website for available position. So I just took one of them and I went, let me just build this format for ours based off of the template that he has. Posted the ad. The end of the ad is 2 questions. And I ran questions relative to the industry. And I think one of the questions was, do you have a webcam available? I like to do face-to-face. When we do Zoom calls, even with our virtual assistants, half our staff, I require cameras on. I'm a relationship person. I like to see people and make relationships. So I like that within our own company too. So do you have a webcam? And then the other one was, have you had at least 12 months of experience in the vacation rental industry? Something to that effect. So it was like really easy 2 questions. No, excuse me. It was, what do you like most about the hospitality industry? So it was really simple. It was like simple questions for them to answer. Anybody that didn't answer it, they didn't read the job ad. They're already nixed from the interview. So I took 120 applicants, went to 40 qualified that went through the steps, which is really simple to do. I did 5 group interviews. So I had 5 group interviews, 1-hour blocks each, and I had 8 to 10 applicants on each group interview. And I just asked general questions in that hour. So I started to narrow down who I like, who I think is a good culture fit. And then eventually was able, within a week, to hire 3 guest comms, between guest comms and just support staff for us, and then 1 IT person as well, using the same process. So that was a very practical takeaway. Spend time on the job ads. Go to acquisition.com, research the job ads that acquisition.com currently has open for their positions at their company. Take that, replicate it, post it on, multiple different websites. You can post it for recruiting, even in different countries. Field them, go through the interview processes, and then hire the candidates that make the most sense. So there's that. There's quite a lot of other things, but that was probably the biggest direct impact of boost to our business that we got when I got back from the workshop.
Love it. No, I love it. And it's interesting. I was, employee number 2 or 3, depending on how you want to look at it, at Angel Host back when we had less than 10 properties that we were working with. Now we're like at 1,200 properties that we work with. And one of the roles, the many hats you have to wear as you're a startup, well, eventually I ended up getting involved in recruitment, right? And everything that had to do with acquisition. And, being a people person, it actually was quite natural. I've always, liked sales as well, but kind of saw it as a sales function as well. And one of the things too, just to give a tip, guest services wise, like we would do this thing where, of course, you're trying to promote it and sell the vision and the culture and the values and why people should join the team. But then you have to, if you sell it too well, to your point, you end up having too many applicants. And so then it's like, how do you add those filters in? And so for us, it was like we did case studies. We would send the rep basically like a script, or not a script, but a situation, in writing. They had, an hour to go through those different scenarios. And by just doing that, you would see what kind of people they were. Like, would they read the entire case? Were they resourceful enough to go into the listing that you actually gave them to come up with an answer that was relevant to the listing itself, that made sense? Did they go straight into like refunding everything to the guests, or were they also, did they have the mindset of trying to protect your resources as well? So anyways, just another way to go about it. We would also ask for intro, like 2-minute videos where just by looking at the video you can get a sense of like the personality and the energy and the vibe. And so anyways, those are all just fun ways to go about it. Hey guys, I could keep you here for hours. This has been quite exciting. We might have to do a second edition here so we can dive more into. I feel like we could do like an entire episode just to talk about the hospitality piece, and another entire episode just to talk more on the real estate and lending side, because this has been so good. And then maybe another just to talk about Alex Hormozzi's frameworks and how they apply to the vacation rental space, because he has so much good stuff out there. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys for taking the time. This has been super fun. We'll wrap it up for now, but hope we can stay in touch. And thanks again for having shared all those insights.
For sure. Thanks for having us.
All right. Have a good one.